I will. Today for our program, Planning and Zoning, County and City, I want to welcome Judy Mignery of the Adams County Planning and Zoning and Lisa Parnell-Rose with Development Services in Hastings. And I'd like to divide their presentation into two parts. The first part, I asked them to talk about their position. It is not an elected position. Talk about the qualifications they would need for the position, their job duties, who they report to, and then we'll take a short break for questions on that category. And then we'll go into part two, which will be talking about some current issues that they have, current things that they're dealing with. So let's begin. Let's see, Judy Mignery, Adams County, how about we begin with you?
Okay, I'll begin. So Judy Mignery, Adams County, I've been in this position since 2010. Prior to that, I was on the Planning Commission. So apparently that is part of one of the things that allowed me to have my position, was because I was on the Planning Commission, but I was on the Planning Commission starting in 2006 until I did get the job in 2010. I believe it was 2006, maybe it was 2004. But anyway, it is an appointed position. I looked through my job description and it says that we would prefer somebody with a four-year college degree, but the minimum requirements are a high school education with experience in planning and land development. And basically it's pretty open-ended, like a lot of appointed positions that do happen in government. So I think that prior to that, I had worked at an engineering company. So I did a lot of survey work, wrote a lot of legal descriptions. So that gave me a background, plus being on the Planning Commission for 5 years prior, gave me a lot of background in having some sort of idea of what is going on in the office instead of just walking in cold. Some of my duties that I do have, and it is the Board of Supervisors, which is now the Board of Commissioners here in Adams County, because they changed after the first of the year to commissioners. They are the ones that do hire me. I do have an recommending body, which is the Planning Commission. They just recommend things to the Board of Supervisors, but this Board of Supervisors are my true boss, a Board of Commissioners. And my duties that include, like here in the county, I approve and review building/zoning permits is one of my duties. And that is one of the differences between county and city is we just have what we call zoning permits. We regulate setbacks. We regulate how far you can put a building away from your property lines. Whereas in the city, they actually have building codes. So they regulate how the building is built and all of those type of things. I just regulate the position on the property and whether that use can be allowed in that zoning district. So things that I bring before the Planning Commission, though, are subdivision plats. So if you want to break down some land that is, if you have like a quarter or something greater than, a larger piece of property, we require you to have a subdivision for anything less than 10 acres. So, and it has to be the minimum requirement is more than 2 acres. So you can't divide out a piece of land that is less than 2 acres in the county. And we do rezones. So if you want to rezone your property, that is something else that we do. Most of our property in Adams County is agriculture zone. We also do have transitional ag, we have mixed use, we have flex space, we have residential, we have rural residential, we have transitional ag. So those different zoning, commercial, those different zoning districts. Also, conditional use permits is another thing that comes before the planning commission that goes on to the governing body of the supervisors or the villages. And conditional uses are permits that we allow on property that each property has permitted uses, and conditional use will allow a permitted use with conditions on it, basically. Did I cover everything, Belva, or is there more?
I think that sounds good. So thank you. Okay, Lisa, we'll hear from you then about the development services in the city of Hastings.
Hi. I have some slides that I'm going to share. I love to do presentation slides, so I'll put those up. But I wanted to let you know that you probably see another gal behind me here, and she is from Hastings College. Her name is Rachel Haynes, and she is interning with us, helping me with the request for proposal write up for our comprehensive plan updates. And she's a communications and sociology major. So she's looking to expand her horizon a little bit and learn a little bit more about planning as well. So I hope that's okay that I invited her to sit in on this, but I thought it would be a really good experience for her. So I'm going to go ahead and real quick share my screen. And I'll kind of lead you through the first few slides, and then I'll unshare so that you can, we can break this up appropriately. So hold on one second here. Okay, do you see the slide there, the main slide? Okay. This is kind of my mentality and motto when it comes to development services, you know, and planning and zoning. I have a wild passion for planning and zoning, and I have that because I grew up my dad's daughter, and some of you probably recognize the C.L. Weimer construction van. For many years, he was a contractor, and I think, you know, known for his quality work. And I would say that, you know, he did that for many years until he had a heart attack and had to change his sort of career choices. But grew up knowing that hard work really made a difference, and, you know, not afraid to roll up my sleeves. And as you can see, I'm actually on the scaffolding there. I had to ask Dad and Mom if they had any pictures because I thought that might be kind of neat. But that's me up on a scaffolding, helping my dad paint the Grummert's property on a job in probably the, I don't know, 70s to 80s, probably early 80s. And I think I'm probably maybe about 9 or 10, I'm not sure. But I remember as early as about 4 years old, helping my dad with painting. And I did some drywall and other things, but even when I went to college, I was able to do the Paint Co., which was kind of a subsidiary for him. So I have sort of the development construction world in me just by genetics, I guess. And I grew up here. Went off to college, went to Kearney, got my double major in criminal justice and political science, got my bachelor's, and then I went on to UNO, and I actually took most of my classes at Lincoln campus, working with Gallup opinion polls, did some state mediation as internships to let our intern know here, and got my MPA, and that's Master's in Public Administration with urban planning, community development. I've done a whole plethora of jobs. I've worked inside Cheyenne Mountain during 9/11. I worked for Lockheed Martin for 11 years. I was the quality assurance manager there. So I have also another passion in me, and that is to make things better. So improving things and processes is big in me as well. And so that's a little background because you probably don't know much about me. And people ask me all the time, are you from here? And I say, well, yeah, I was, and then I left. And so as far as my duties, the biggest thing really, supervisor and department head, as the Director of Development Services, I oversee the staff for inspections, building, and also planning and zoning and inspections, code enforcement. We do property maintenance inspections. So a lot of what I do is assigning and reviewing their work where necessary. I will say when I came into this job, I have the luxury of having very experienced staff. Mark Evans, our building inspector, has been here for well over 20 years, as has Terry Sheffield. She's been here for a long time, and both of them are amazing and have been very helpful to me. And all my staff is, you know, they're what helps make our dreams come true with building. Is, you know, they do the work and really are good at what they do. So I've been very impressed by that, and we've, you know, had to change our way of thinking a little bit, but more or less they're used to being a little on their own, because for many years they didn't really have a director, and until Dawn a couple of years ago, they didn't, you know, they had an interim director. Joe Patterson did a little bit of overseeing them, but for the most part they were on their own. So motivating, training them, evaluating, even hiring, disciplining, termination, all part of my job. Making sure we meet their goals, make them happy, as well as our department, and we perform well at what we do. I also am involved in work plans for the department, identifying the needs of the community for planning overall, and preparing our annual department budget, and then providing that to Dave Patak, managing and compiling the demographic data, and making projections and estimates, as well as coordinating and streamlining our development process, which I've been working very hard on doing. Community development's another piece to that. I love the community piece. That's what we're doing right now. Is, you know, I love to talk to people and hear what they're saying, really think about, you know, what we can do to meet those needs in a more efficient and effective manner. And we can't meet everyone's needs, obviously, but if, you know, I always say if I'm 100% meeting the need, then I may not be doing my job right. But if I make about 80%, that's probably pretty good. Responding to a lot of inquiries and complaints. You know, people call me all the time and ask about this piece of land and can they subdivide it, and what can I do to make this dream happen? And so we lead them through the whole process. Participating in luncheons and meetings, and then corresponding with like Tony and other media is part of the job. But the biggest piece is probably the urban planning piece, and that's what I love the most. That's providing that consultation on the land information, you know, giving them zoning, providing them background on our codes and how that fits in and what they need to do, the steps they need to take, working with other city staff, also commissioners, realtors, businesses, all emails, phone, all day long, my phone rings. And scheduling pre-applications with them, assisting them ahead of time with that process. And I'll kind of explain that a little bit later. But analyzing what they have to our comprehensive plan, which is what, you know, our intern is here to help us work on and update. I split planning up into two different areas, short-term planning and long-term planning. Short-term planning is kind of more what Judy was kind of giving you a taste of with the site plan reviews and plan developments. You know, we have a plan development plan that's coming about through Theater District, which is the old Imperial Mall. That's going to be a development plan. And variances, easements, rezoning, and then long-term planning, which is more like your comprehensive plan, your transportation plan, which we're working on right now, and your housing studies, all of that. So lots of different things, you know, and then all of these additional duties as well. So, and I guess I put the quote at the bottom because I like to say that, you know, when it comes down to what I'm doing, I always have to ask myself, you know, Lisa, do what's right, you know, and sometimes that's not so easy, especially in the public sector. We have a lot of people to please, and there's a lot of different perceptions. So always explaining to them thoroughly why we're doing what we're doing and what the code says, and explaining that process to them is important. Sometimes not the most popular person, but that's okay. I'm okay with that. So if you have any questions about that first part, let me know. I'm going to stop sharing. This is just to show you our org chart also. I forgot I had that slide in here. I answer to Dave Patak. He is my supervisor, and of course he works for City Council and Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Questions on part 1 for either Lisa or Judy? I'll toss out this one. Did either of you in, let's say, high school ever have any inkling that this might be your career?
Let's see here. I would say, sorry, I lost you. I'm having some technical difficulties. I would say that I probably did start thinking about planning, just again, my roots with my dad in construction business and being a part of that. And the other thing was, I was really largely into speech and debate. And so there's a lot of that here. And I always think that Mrs. Tebby would be so proud of me. I do think, unfortunately, that she's passed since, but I've used a lot of those skills just in what I do. So.
Okay. Judy, did you ever have an inkling that this might be your career?
No.
No?
In high school, my plan was to do pre-vet. So I went to college,
Okay.
math and science background, decided to just go into education. So I have a BS in education and with math and science. So a lot of math and science. Didn't continue that direction though. Instead, went to work for an engineering firm, and actually while doing that, the planning department, so I worked for JEO. I worked here in Hastings, but they had an office out of Lincoln, and they had a planning department there out of Wahoo and Lincoln. And he needed some assistance on some, I think it was probably TIF financing and CDBG grant writing and stuff in the village of Kennesaw. So I had to do a lot of research for him, and I kind of like that research history thing. So that's what got me kind of excited about doing it. That's kind of where it all started. But yeah, with all the legal descriptions from writing legal descriptions for surveys and things like that, and out there in the field doing survey work is kind of where, yeah, that probably led to enjoying this type of work.
Okay. League members, any questions?
So where are we in our development plan for Hastings? She talks about wanting to, that's her exciting project. So where are we, would you say?
So right now, they are in the process of doing the very first step that's very critical to their development. And of course, you know that it is to the south of the airport. And one of the very first things they need to do as part of that airspace zoning is to apply for their 7460-1, which is to have the FAA evaluate their heights and whether or not that will pose any hazard. And it's not really an approval, because when it comes down to it, it falls back on our local codes, but they provide a recommendation, and then they'll provide them, us, basically the local entity, guidance on whether or not that's going to pose any health and safety issues. So that's the very first thing, and that does take a little bit, but they are giving us different pieces for their development plan that we're reviewing, and we've been working with them pretty closely to educate them on the process and the codes. And because it's a little different here in Hastings than they're used to in Lincoln. The engineering firm is in Lincoln, and so, you know, they are used to a different way of things, and so that's part of the process. So that's kind of where we're at. I do anticipate we're shooting for April, I believe, maybe March with the preliminary plat, because they will be replatting that area as well. And actually the replatting, the land as far as how it's divided out for those outlying lots and whatnot, they won't require, you know, height. It won't be a height issue, so we can move forward with that piece. But we're just waiting on them to give us more pieces. I just got an email from them. So
You talk about local codes, and that must mean it must vary from what a local. How far is that county? Is that city? And how much difficulty is that to have so many different local codes then? How often do you bump into the next layer?
So Judy and I work a lot together when it's in the 2-mile territorial zone, extraterritorial jurisdiction. So basically, if you look at a map, I'm not sure if I have one that's quite available. I mean, you might be able to see the maps on my wall a little bit, but I don't know if you can see it that well. If you go to GIS and you look, the city limits are outlined in black. And anything that's between the 2 miles from where this edge of the city limits is out to the 2 miles is outlined in green. That's the area that Judy and I will work on together. Her codes apply, my codes apply. We do have, it's an overlay district that we refer to when we're trying to determine use. I think, you know, we probably both want to work on maybe doing a couple of tweaks to that perhaps, but it works pretty darn well. And then I always like we get together and have ad hoc meetings. In fact, Ann Hinton comes to those meetings. And that's kind of nice because we can talk through, you know, what are you thinking about this area? And here's kind of what I'm thinking. And we've had to do that a couple of times, not always, but I think it's working pretty well. Yeah.
Thank you for that question. As we're talking about the ETJ, extraterritorial zones, how is that measured? Because the city boundaries are so jagged. Do you measure the 2 miles from the furthest point, or how do you determine that 2 mile?
Well, I think it can be done a couple of different ways. So it's like, I think that they draw an arc from like the point of, I'm using my hands to describe and that doesn't work. But anyway, I think that from the edge of a city limit corner, they draw an arc and then that creates a arc 2 miles out from that point. And wherever that falls, in some cases, they draw a circle around it. In the city of Hastings case, they go to the nearest quarter section line or elegant part of that section. So it might be a quarter line or something like that, as long as it falls within that boundary of where that arc has been struck at from the farthest point of each city. And then that's how they connect all those lines. And that's how they get that 2 mile jurisdiction, basically. Okay. Lisa, can you add any more?
Well, I can, but this is actually just redone, as you know, right before I came in 2019 under Don Threewood. But, you know, recently we had a situation where we had someone that actually, in doing that, it broke up part of their property and they were wanting to subdivide. And 3/4 of it was in the county exclusively, and then 1/4 of it was in that ETJ. So Judy and I collaborated a little bit, and I basically, you know, looking at it, it seemed like it was more appropriate in the county. And when we were working on pulling that back, I found out with our GIS technician that we had done that in quarter miles. And so that's exactly the case, is then it was pulled back to the quarter mile. Unfortunately, we had split someone's house with that line. So we fixed that. It's fixed now.
Okay. Okay, well, we've just gracefully merged into the second part of our program here. We're already into it. Since Judy talked first in our beginning part, Lisa, do you want to go ahead with the current issues that you're working with in the part two part of the program?
Sure, I have some slides again.
Okay.
I hope that's okay. Let me real quick get it to where I can do that. Trying to get it to, okay, do you see it yet?
Not yet.
Okay. Let me share it first. Did
There it is.
you see it? And I'm going to make it bigger
Yes.
here. A little more challenging when we're, you know, at a distance. So a couple of things. One of the things that I wanted to show you first was a lot of people don't realize this, but with planning and zoning, we do a lot of development up front. We're helping people through the process, answering those questions. So we do offer meetings with them, and that includes all of our department heads, not all of them, but the relevant ones. So like I might have police invited to a particular meeting if it affects that area, or fire usually is involved. And we'll give them a concept and say, hey, what do you guys think, before they sink the money into the process. And we do reviews, internal reviews. Off to the side there's some chicken scratch. That's a shot of some a review that we had done, hard copy. I just want to point that out because you'll see why later. And so next is the Citizens for Community Improvement and Positive Community Improvement, excuse me. And this has been very valuable. I really relish this committee. We meet, we had been meeting once every 2 weeks, then it kind of went to a month, and now we're back to every 2 weeks. I enjoy meeting with them because they give me sort of what they're hearing from all of the contractors and developers in our community. And is there anything that they're upset about? What is that? What can we do to make that better? Is there anything that that they like, you know, and we like to hear kudos too. So sometimes that'll happen. And then I will communicate with them just what I'm doing with you, any new initiatives or anything that's going on, hot topics, affairs, news flashes, so to speak, for development services. And one of the interesting things as we've been working together is I'm finding there are a lot of complaints about just our community and how clean it is, and how, you know, people picking up their trash, and, you know, sort of the appearance. A lot of the beautification comes up. And so in my past dealings, I've dealt a lot with Keep America Beautiful. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they are an organization that was established in the 80s. I think Nancy Reagan even had helped forge that forward. And they are there to help give you grant opportunities and provide you tools so that you can, you know, inspire your community to help clean up the area. Because we, in this office, I just have Mark, and Mark is he's my go-to for property maintenance. But a lot of people don't realize that 6 years ago, our responsibilities maneuvered over to the police department. So we actually don't do a lot with weeds and trash and stuff like that, but we do take on the property maintenance. But people still come to us and expect us to answer those questions because they're so used to it. So usually we refer them to the police, but it's just become apparent to me that we could really use that organization. So that group is now taking on looking at into hopefully bringing that to, you know, that to Hastings and what we need to do with that. So we've sat in on some meetings with the Nebraska affiliate, and they are talking with them, and they're kind of doing their own thing with this. So I don't know that it'll run through the city necessarily. It can either be a part of a city board eventually, or group, a committee, or it can be completely nonprofit and they do it on their own. But I think it's just a good example of how wonderful those meetings have been, you know, and hopefully we can get some things like that moving. And they also have a better understanding of, hey, you know what, it can't just be put on one or two people to keep the community clean. It really has to be the community helping too. Another really exciting thing for development services is we are switching from our access database tracking and our seamless documents that are online to a new portal. And this is even more important than it ever was because of COVID-19. We had to very quickly, we had about half of our permits were in seamless documents online, but we had to, within a few weeks before we closed down, we had to take all of that and finish it into a seamless doc so that we could actually accommodate people at a distance. And it just isn't working very well because seamless document, as wonderful as it is, it doesn't communicate with the tracking system. So Terry ends up just re-entering all of that data. So we have a new online system. We started doing interviews, we looked at several different companies and software. The whole team's been helping me with that. And we have picked iWorks, and we are actually going to bring this hopefully online on Monday. So, and we are working on emails to all of our active permits to let them know that. We've run into a couple of things, so I'm hoping that we're not going to slide forward a week, but it's very, very, very close. And it's exciting because it will track everything that's ever happened for one address in our system. So we can click an area on a map, we can click your property, and we can see everything pull up from an interior remodel to a code complaint to whatever it be. We will have records of it. Now, I've prefaced that with we have years and years of files, and I have a part-time administrative assistant that helps me put that up into there. But it's only as good as the information that's going to be uploaded into, but we're working on that too. And this is just a shot of the portal. So when you click on submit a permit, this is what'll come up, and then you will click, here for building permit or dumpster permit, and then planning and zoning down here. And what you can't see is further down below that is code enforcement. Also be able to do our reviews. Now, remember I told you there was that kind of hard copy that was all written on. That's how we kind of did our reviews before. Now we can upload these things into the software, and everyone that reviews, to include Judy, by the way, lots of times we'll review if it's in the ETJ and the deeds, the Office of Deeds, the city attorney, everyone that I have in that group. I can then send them an email, they'll get a notice of that, and then they'll be able to go in and make their marks via stamps and text right on it. Then I can either shut down all those layers or erase a layer or add them back in, and then I can send it back to the developer via email, and we don't even really have to have them come in. They can see, and it's so much clearer than what we do now because now we have Plat Tracker, and it's been working very great. It's been a good step in the right direction, but it's everyone's typing in their comments, and so there's a room for misinterpretation of what we're asking them to do. So this is really kind of wonderful. Some additional things to share, comprehensive update. Of course, I talked about our interns who's going to help me a little bit with that. Yeah. And, I'm not sure if she'll be able to stick around to volunteer her time for additional hours, but I told her that's up to her. She'll be helping me with city council meetings and planning commission and seeing the whole process. So the housing study is final, and on Monday that goes to city council for a work session. And the consultants will be giving a breakdown, a presentation of everything on that. And then the Civic Center is done, and that's talking about a remodel of the Armory. We have next steps. The next step is to find money, really, and hopefully we have some grants that we can do. Right now, they're kind of on hold, the CDBG grants for construction. And we have lots of exciting projects. Imperial Mall is really just one. Off to the left here, I kind of put a rendering of what that entails. You know, we're talking about two large apartment buildings to the kind of the west end of that. And in between, they even have a pool, you know, in this rendering. Sometimes those things change. But then the old Kmart would become an indoor sports activities area. And we have some outlying lots here, and then they're going to use the area that is that triangle piece off of Marion and 12th Street to be a detention pond, which is a good use of that because of the fact that there really is no height allowable there. So to a certain degree, about through here, you're really not allowed any height at all. So that, and then as far as current affairs, you know, comprehensive plan, again, that's 12 years old. We're working on that. Our zoning code and our subdivision code, we call it Franken code because we've just been putting Band-Aids on it for years and doing little code updates here and there. And when you do that so much, what ends up happening is the integrity of the code as a whole starts to lose each little piece, and maybe you didn't cross-reference it or link it. So that's why it's so important to fix that. We're trying to change the perception. That's been sort of an issue, but I think we're working well through that. Is, you know, when I first came on, they'd been here for so long. It was like, well, Lisa, you know, we've always done it that way. And I don't like to hear that too often, because just because we've done it that way doesn't mean that we should continue to do it that way. Now, sometimes we should, and tribal knowledge is wonderful, but you always want to look for ways to improve things and make things more efficient and better if you can. And then enablement. And the reason I have that is, you know, we went from a staff of 10 back in the 90s, I guess. And we did lose some of the things that we were responsible for, like health, food inspections and whatnot. We migrated to the state. However, when we did that, they cut us from a staff of 10 to 5. And we've lost what we've done is we've done our best to fill every need that we can. And sometimes you think, oh, I'll make a difference. I'll let this guy kind of, you know, but then if the next person comes along and you don't remember you did it that way, then you're not being consistent and you're not being, you know, equal. So, so there's that. And then housing, you'll see more of this if you join the city council work session, but overall, 20.8% of our residential structures in Hastings are rated below normal in that study. So, and that leads me to my other thing is we only have Mark, who is already building inspector, as a sort of a, you know, code enforcement property maintenance. We really need a full-time, you know, code enforcement official. And I could really use a city planner because I'm like an Energizer bunny, but only for so long. So, and so budget, you know, you have to work that out with your budget because I don't get to make those decisions. I can propose them, but city council largely makes those decisions. And then building a relationship with the NDOT has become something that I've noticed in our transportation plan. This is a shot, it's online. We have this is our public engagement survey that we did back in September, and sort of a tally of some of the problems that people are noting. Congestions in yellow, you can see 32% of the people complained about congestion off of Burlington. Well, Burlington is in most areas state jurisdiction. I mean, they're the ones that are going to take care of that and change the signals out and whatnot. And I think that what we've learned through some of the meetings and whatnot is that we need to just start building that relationship. And if there are agreements that we need to make and legal documents that we need to do to have a little bit more control of that, hopefully we can work on that so that we can make the changes that are necessary. And I suspect that'll be a part of the transportation and parking plan, you know, once we get it back, that report, that final report. So that's that, and hopefully I didn't go too long. I'm sorry, Judy, if I did.
Thank you. Okay, Judy, talking about some current things in the county and also working with the villages within the county too. So, okay, Judy?
Well, I think Dave Patak always says whenever the Nebraska legislature is in session, things are not safe. And that's usually kind of what drives the big issues that affect zoning and planning. So yes, currently right now, broadband is one of the hot topics that's in the legislature. So it's what rules that they hand us, how are we going to handle it? Because most generally, as Lisa was saying, some of our codes, some of our regulations haven't been updated, or we've band-aided them and update them along. But if the legislature hands out something and says this is now statute, we have to react and change. And I don't want to say react because that sounds negative, but yeah, some of the things that they come up with technology and changes and needs that we need to have, which is exciting, but we have regulations that maybe don't allow it on our end to happen. So we need to change to go with the why they felt the change was necessary. So just as Lisa was talking about the airport a few years ago, the legislature decided to establish a rule about airports where there was jurisdiction out to 10 miles. So our regulations then have to reflect that the airport authority can regulate that far out. So those are some changes that do occur, and we always have to keep in the back of our mind. Wind and solar, so far in the county, not much on solar, but once again, there is a big solar proposal in Clay County, which affects us as far as transmission lines. So transmission lines in Nebraska have always been ran by the public power, but now we are looking at perhaps some private individuals wanting to put in power lines because public power sees that it's cheaper for them to construct it and to obtain the easements and to go with an outside source, but yet everything that's ever been done has been done with public power, so they have eminent domain, whereas a private individual doesn't. So then it's, how do we deal with that? How does that affect or follow our regulations that we currently have in place? So there are always things that we need to be looking at updating. Livestock, that, we're an agricultural friendly county. We've been designated that. We were one of the first that ever designated that, but yet it seems like if there is livestock issues that come up, people get into a big panic over it. I think that our regulations probably need to be tweaked a little bit more on livestock because we are livestock friendly. So, that type of thing. Agriculture, even on a federal level, they start to talk about EPA regulations. So then does our regulations fit with what EPA wants to be going on, and how farming can be done? And we are a farming community where, agriculture is huge here. Cell towers, along with broadband, along with internet, everybody during COVID saw the importance of having high-speed internet and the need for that, for education, for communication, for being able to do our jobs. So then it does we have regulations that only allow for cell towers like 5 miles apart, but maybe there's a need for greater than that. And the way different cell companies handle things as far as their speed of their networks and where the placement of their towers need to be. So yeah, there's always reviewing our regulations to see if it meets the needs of the public, I guess, is what, there's always things out there.
Judy?
And what else, Belva?
I think there's a question right now. So Phyllis, did you have a question for either?
Yeah, for Judy. I have a question with regard to the the livestock friendly approach to things. My understanding was decisions about environmental issues were to be made by the state DEQ, and it was taken out of the hands of the local people. Is that correct?
Are you referring to the matrix or what?
Well, that the assessments would be made based on, and permitting would be taken out of the hands of the local government and given to the DEQ, and you couldn't block it if the or protest if the DEQ said it was okay. And yet of late, our state DEQ has been anything less than effective in protecting the environment.
So a few years ago, there was a proposal for a matrix system for siting livestock facilities, CAFOs. And in that, I don't know that it completely put it in the hands of DEE, but it was pretty much if it met all of the requirements of DEQ at that time, and there was a question list that the matrix provided that the developer of the livestock facility would have to meet all of those necessary steps. It ended up being that counties could adopt it, but they didn't necessarily have to. Here in Adams County, I utilize that for findings of facts when we are citing livestock facilities, but we have not adopted it as our primary source. So basically, in the matrix, if you score like above a 75% in this whole list of things, this checklist of things, it could be permitted that district. But we didn't adopt it. We just utilize it because it is a very nice list of facts. The two that have been permitted recently here in Adams County in the last probably 5 years, both scored like 90s, over 90 in it. But we still have a public hearing process so that people can have input. And I don't know if that answered your question.
Somewhat.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Oh, sorry. That's my dog. I'm sorry. Any
You
other
want to talk about
questions?
kennels, Belva?
I have a question for Lisa. I'm just interested in how they define the quality of the housing and what power you have to go in and impact. And at what point, how do they decide if it's okay? And at what point can a city or community condemn something, or is that something that your office does, or how does that all work?
So what the consultants did was establish basically a formula. They took the Adams County records, assessment records, and they categorized them into a scale of, and I think I won't know all of them, but there's like 6 scales, and the middle one is normal. So it was like very poor, moderately poor, and don't quote me on that because I don't have it in front of me, but
Okay, that's fine.
Three below normal and 3 above. And so then what they did was they took that and divided it by what was above. And so that's how they came up with that. One of the things when I read that research that I asked them to do was explain why they removed the normal from that formula. But obviously if it remains, it's going to not have an impact. So it was just taking what was below normal and what was above normal. But they have spelled that out nicely in the report. The final report will be online on our website in our reports and studies area. So if you go to development services and you look at the discovery bar off to the left-hand side, one of the areas that you can go into is studies and reports. That's where everything that we have from our long-term planning studies will go when they're complete. That won't be uploaded until after it's presented to city council officially, you know, because then it'll be a final deal if they're okay with it. Yeah, it's scheduled. It's already scheduled to be out there for you to see. And it is also included in the work session packet for city council. So if you wanted to look at it now, you could look at it in the packet as well. But it explains, it has a good section on how they came up with that. And yeah, I think it was like 15, I think I had in my presentation, it was like a little over almost 1,600 structures, very poor. So there's a lot, and they talk about and advise in that report, you know, whether they would advise that it just be completely torn down and then that land used for something else, or if it was something that needed to be just worked on and redeveloped. So a lot of these areas, of course, we've blighted. We have blight studies that have been done, and so they're you know, available for redevelopment through the CRA and TIF funding if needed. So that gives, I hope I answered that question.
But what are some things that would make a property poor as opposed to being above?
So like plumbing and utilities and infrastructure, I think that was called out as one of the things that was like, it really not good if it's falling apart. I don't have it in front of me, but I do know that was one of those things. And, you know, then like you move up a little bit more when it's more of like paint and other things, that's a little less, that's not considered so much.
Lisa, I actually have a question about that too. There was a property in my neighborhood that was awful, and I called my city council person because I didn't know any better, and he was wonderful, and he referred me to the city's NEAT committee. I don't remember what that acronym is. So there, it sounds like there's coordination between you and the city council, and they took care of it. It was wonderful.
Right. Yeah, the NEAT committee was something we did do. That was before I got here. So all I know is that Mark Evans was on that committee. And then there were several people on that committee that would advise or play a part in that, like Troy Borderstrass from Fire, I'm sure was on that committee. Okay. And then these properties would be reported to him. And, you know, again, there's a lot of legal work, you know, and you got to notice them once and twice. And then there's, you know, work with city attorney to do the things. And it's all spelled out in the code, how that process works. It's a pretty timely deal. And that's kind of why I had in my slide, we really could use a full-time, you know, code enforcement officer, because he's supposed to be looking at doing inspections and looking at all of our building permits, which is a large job already. So, you know, when you look at 1,500 structures that you need to make decisions on, that's when you got to go, well, how many hours in a day do you have, right?
Well, they took good care of it. So, and if I understand correctly, the NEAT committee doesn't exist anymore. Okay.
It's just I don't know that I would say it doesn't exist. It's just kind of stopped, I think. Okay. But again, I really think that there are some things that, as far as community, this community is great about helping out and wanting to get involved. I think we just don't really provide the forums for that, you know, not to the fullest. And so I really am excited about Keep America Beautiful, the grant opportunities that they could provide. I know Grand Island has Keep America Beautiful. They're an affiliate. And there is a small startup cost to do that. So it'll be a decision if it goes through the city at all. You know, if it's a city committee, there would be some decision-making on the parts of city council, but as a nonprofit even, that would be fabulous. You know, have citywide cleanup.
Thank you. Other questions? Lisa, when Don was here, I remember him focusing on accessibility issues, curb cuts and something. Is that ongoing or what's currently being done?
Right. Well, our code, the way that the curb cuts and the accessibility work, we work really hand in hand with our city engineer. And, you know, they help us review all of that as well when there's a recommendation. But then as far as access and, you know, making sure that we have the right streets where they need to be when we grow to the future, you know, we're all looking at that. We're not going to, we don't, obviously don't want to landlock something to where it can't develop, or, you know, if developing that street is just too excessive for, you know, say a residential developer, you know, we may need to look at, you know, is it the right zone? I mean, maybe if it's a lighter commercial zone. So we're looking at those things constantly from the planning world, but when it comes to the actual curb cuts and the permits, they do filter through our office, but it's really a city engineering, you know, they look at that and approve it. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Wow, this hour went really fast. So thank you both. Any final questions that you just want to have answered while we have both Lisa and Judy here?
Melva, can I ask Lisa a question about we have that study that I believe is online for the accessibility. Is that not on the city website?
So because it was done before I'm here, I'm probably just struggling a little bit with the mapping here. Are we talking about the mobility study?
Yes.
Oh, okay, yeah. Now, if you're talking about sidewalks and that, yes. And you know, what's amazing about that is we applied for a CDBG grant that follows the recommendations of that mobility study. And the 4 blocks surrounding the parking lot to the north of City Hall radius are going to get an upgrade, hopefully starting this summer, this spring and summer, as part of that grant. We matched it, and I forget exactly what it all entailed for numbers, forgive me, but I do know that they're making them ADA accessible and all of that. So yes, thank you, Anne, for clarifying that a little bit for me. When I hear street cut, I start to think of streets, and I went off in another direction. So thank you.
Okay. Okay. Well, I want to say a big thank you to Judy Mignery, Lisa Parnell-Rose, and Rachel. Good to have you on board with us too. So thank you very much. Stay warm the rest of your day.
Thanks
And
for letting me sit in, ladies. I appreciate it.
you're
And
most welcome. Yes.
thank you.
Okay, goodbye, everyone.
All right, thank you.